In 1750, England owned 13 American colonies. Delaware was one of them. Most important colony. It was very small. It did not even have an official name. But Delaware was located so that it was right in the middle of things. Much of the colony's business took place in Delaware. Colonial travelers moved in a constant stream through the centrally located colony of Delaware. And the little colony itself got a close view of everything that happened. In the next 50 years, a great deal was going to happen. In the 1700s, Delaware was mainly a farming colony. The colony's full title was the Counties of Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex upon Delaware. But this was too big a mouthful for most people. The citizens simply said they lived in lower counties. It was also called Penn's Territories, but not very often. Most of the people made a good living from their farms. They were neither very rich nor very poor. They harvested their crops and sold them to other colonies or exported them to foreign countries. The marketplaces of Newcastle, Dover, and Lewis did excellent business. These three towns were the most important towns of the colony. The seats of the three counties, and two of them, Dover and Lewis, had been founded by William Penn. The towns were busy, growing places in the 1700s. The markets were gathering places for people of all professions. Since Delaware was nearly surrounded by water, it was natural that many should make a living from the sea. Men went out after both the small fish and the great sperm whale. Shipbuilders worked along the coast. From 1750 on, their trade was to become more and more important. And there were other businesses. But most of the men farmed, and their whole families helped. The citizens of Delaware were mainly country people, and towns were few and small. In 1760, the colony's largest city, Wilmington, had less than 2,000 people. Yet, even in these small towns, there were definite signs that Delaware was no longer to be considered the wilderness. Brick homes and buildings had replaced wooden huts. Everything, from furniture to fashion, had more style. Delawareans worked hard, but they also had fun. A man could vote if he owned 50 acres of land, with 12 acres cleared, or if he owned other property worth 40 pounds or more. Schools and education were quite poor. But Delaware had its own courts. And the colony had its own legislature, the General Assembly, which met at Newcastle. For its first speaker, in 1704, the General Assembly had elected William Rodney. Rodney was to have a famous grandson named Caesar. All in all, 18th century Delaware was lively, civilized, with a touch of wildness like cockfighting left still. Its people were high-spirited and hard-working. After over a century of struggle, Delaware had achieved a secure feeling of peace. The colony might have been content to be ruled by England for a long time. It might have been, except in the 1700s, all the American colonies began to have trouble with England. As Delaware had wanted to be free of Pennsylvania, all the colonies now wanted to be free of England. The feeling did not rise up overnight. It took some time to develop. The settlers who had come to America were strong, independent people, or they would never have made the trip. To survive, they had had to depend on themselves and learn to handle their own problems. They were beginning to feel capable of handling their own government as well. On the other hand, England owned the colonies and had the right to expect the privileges of ownership. England expected the privilege of controlling colonial trade, government, and taxes. Each colony was locally ruled by an English governor. Delaware was not very troubled by this because its affairs were handled by the English governor from Pennsylvania, who only took an occasional trip to the lower counties. The governor had the right, whether he used it or not, to veto, kill, any law passed by the General Assembly. Still, this intruding Englishman did not really bother Delawareans. The real trouble did not start until 1764. The Sugar Act of 1764, which placed a tax on sugar, rum, and molasses, and in Delaware's case hurt trade with the West Indies, where much of the colony's corn and wheat was sold, and much of its sugar, rum, and molasses bought. Then in 1765, the Stamp Act, where Delawareans found the Sugar Act disappointing, they found the Stamp Act very irritating. This act placed a tax on all sorts of publications and legal papers. The citizens who were hurt by the tax were the leaders of the colonies, lawyers, printers, rich farmers, and businessmen. Delaware's voice was added to the raging of all the colonies.
This Stamp Act will ruin us.
Shocking.
We cannot let them do this. We cannot submit.
If we don't submit, what can we do but rebel?
Fight the British? We are British.
We are American.
We might have to fight. Shocking.
Delaware did not find the idea of a rebellion shocking. As yet, the colony had no serious thoughts of revolting against England, but some of the other colonies did. Thomas McCain and Caesar Rodney represented Delaware at the Stamp Act Congress the colonies held in New York. They met to decide what to do about the Stamp Act. The meeting resulted in the colonies writing an angry petition to England. Their document was designed to throw a scare into the British, which it did. The colonies threatened to stop trade with England unless the Stamp Act was repealed. If the act was not killed immediately, no English goods would be bought in America. There was rejoicing in the colonies when British merchants, eager for American trade, persuaded the English Parliament to get rid of the Stamp Act. Delaware, which had been uneasy over the quarrel with England, relaxed, its feelings soothed. But not for long. England was still trying to get more taxes from her American colonies. In 1767, the British Parliament put forth the Townshend duties, which taxed a number of imported items, including tea, paper, glass, necessities. The colonies screamed in protest. Delaware, which had never wanted trouble, found the Townshend duties maddening. Irritated by the duties, the prominent Delawarean John Dickinson, himself a wealthy landowner, wrote a series of letters to a Philadelphia newspaper.
Parliament has no right to present these taxes. The Townshend duties violate all our known rights.
He signed them simply a farmer, and he spoke strongly against the new taxes. Dickinson's letters were published throughout the colonies and in Europe. They made him the most famous Delawarean of the age. Protests such as Dickinson's, plus the colony's renewed threat of stopping trade with England, caused the repeal, the cancellation, of all the Townshend duties except one, and that one was to cause a great deal of trouble. The tax on tea remained. The colonies grew angrier and angrier over the tax on tea. Their fury came to a climax in 1773 with the Boston Tea Party. A group of men, thinly disguised as Indians, boarded the British merchant ships and pitched a cargo of tea into the Boston harbor. England was outraged. As punishment, the English Parliament shut down the Boston harbor, keeping ships from either entering or leaving the port. Boston was ordered to pay for the ruined tea. trade was hurt. People were thrown out of work. As this news spread through the colonies, the feeling against England grew higher and hotter. The latest British actions against Boston became known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts. The people of the three lower counties were just as upset as anybody. Delaware had found the Sugar Act disappointing, the Stamp Act irritating, and the Townsend duties maddening. It found the Intolerable Acts absolutely intolerable.
Somehow we must free ourselves from England.
The answer is war.
No, not war. We must come to an understanding with England.
We must fight.
No, at all costs, we must avoid a war.
The assembly was disturbed and divided, but most of the members were against a war with England. They still felt loyal to their mother country. At this time, 1774, Caesar Rodney was the Speaker of the Delaware General Assembly, and a man who was considered a leader by all the colonists. Delaware sent Caesar Rodney, Thomas McCain, and George Reed to a meeting of all the colonies in Philadelphia. The First Continental Congress asked England to repeal the Intolerable Acts. England refused and began shipping more soldiers to the colonies. And the colonies began to train their own soldiers. Delaware still did not want a war, but the citizens realized they might have to fight for their rights. April 19, 1775, Lexington, Massachusetts. British troops and colonial militia came into conflict. They tried to talk the thing out, but they called it the shot heard round the world. No one knows who fired it, but the war was on. The colonies had to move fast. The Second Continental Congress appointed George Washington as commander of the new Continental Army. Delaware gathered its own company of soldiers. And in Philadelphia, the Congress was debating a resolution put forth by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia.
Resolved that these united colonies are and of a right ought to be free and independent states.
And the fighting continued. On July 1st, 1770, the Continental Congress was still debating the question of independence. It was trying to get a unanimous vote for freedom. New York was still refusing to break with England. To make the decision stronger, the Congress needed Delaware's vote for independence. And Delaware's two representatives were in disagreement. One voted aye, the other no. An urgent message was sent to Caesar Rodney, who was down in Delaware. Word came to Rodney at his home near Dover. He was needed to vote in Philadelphia. He must break the tie and secure his colony's vote for independence.
Easy, boy, easy.
July 2nd, 1776.
Delaware votes aye for independence.
And for the support of this declaration, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
The Declaration of Independence was signed. The United States was born. Delaware, which had wanted to be loyal and peaceful, turned its back on English rule. It would do its best to survive as a state. Yankee Doodle had indeed come to town, and Yankee Doodle had come to Delaware as well. But the fight for independence was still ahead.